President Cyril Ramaphosa and his Ghanaian counterpart, Nana Akufo-Addo, co-chaired the South Africa-Ghana Binational Commission in Pretoria. The aim to strengthen cooperation between the two countries. This is the second meeting of the Binational Commission between the two countries following their gathering in Accra in Ghana in 2021. One of the key issues between the two states is how to increase trade between them. And one vehicle that might assist in doing this is the much-touted African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. The question is, has this already seen some increased activity between Ghana and South Africa? To find out, I spoke to the Executive Head of Trade and Africa and China Business and Commercial Clients at the Standard Bank Group, Philip Myburgh. Philip Myburgh, thanks very much indeed for joining us. Welcome to the channel.
Hello, Peter. Thank you very much for having me.
So, Philip, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement has been touted and it's in play. I wonder, as we look at what's happening between South Africa and Ghana, has it started to bear some fruit?
Yes, Peter, thank you. Of course, the AFCFTA, the intention behind it is to create the largest free trade area in the world, allowing for the free movement of goods, services, and people across the continent. We know as of today, there are many challenges inhibiting this, both in tariff barriers as well as non-tariff barriers. And South Africa and Ghana, as you mentioned, is a good example of some of these challenges that have been faced in the past. But fortunately, now we're starting to see some positive movement in this regard. Last year, Ghana was part of the initial pilot countries, part of the GTI, the Guided Tariff Initiative. And now this year, South Africa has joined that group, which allows these countries to start trading with each other under an improved or reduced tariff regime, allowing these countries to start practically applying the potential benefits of the AFCFTA. And like we saw with these first transactions starting to happen at the beginning of February, we're starting to see slow but steady trade starting to happen in that context.
So tell me, what makes Ghana a strong trading partner for South Africa?
Well, Ghana is an interesting one because of two things. One is, of course, Ghana is a fairly stable country. It's a fairly stable democratic country. They've got a long history of peaceful transition between governments. A fairly easy country to do business in the context of West Africa and in the rest of Africa, generally speaking. So that in itself is very attractive, the maturity of that market. But then secondly, it also gives you a lot of access into the broader West Africa space. We know that there's a strong manufacturing component in Ghana that services their border countries there. So often when investors and businesses think about trade with Ghana, they also incorporate some of the bordering countries that are less mature, but would certainly benefit from indirectly with Ghana. So certainly very, very good opportunity.
Talking about opportunities, what areas, goods maybe that have you seen are maybe what could be of mutual beneficiation or benefit for both countries?
Sure, yes. So unfortunately, during this pilot phase of Guided Tariff Initiative, not all products are included in the construct of that. So there's pilot products approved in which they will test the operational and the legal and the institutional components of the AFCFTA to really make sure that the frameworks are in place and the rails are in place, so to say, to really scale the concept. But yes, certain products already moving. We're seeing a lot of mining equipment, specifically from South Africa, going to Ghana. But we know Ghana's got some fascinating products too. They're obviously a large producer of cocoa. We know they're famous for their shea butter. So lots of opportunities with Ghana, but even more broadly for South African businesses now that we are part of this initiative. Kenya being another example. Kenya is also part of the initiative. We've seen fridges as an example that were manufactured in South Africa already moving to Kenya. And we know that there's some great coffee and some great teas that can come the other way. So there's there really is some exciting prospects in the context of the products that we already know that these countries are famous for.
As somebody that provides financial services and advice to clients in both countries, what are some of the issues that have been coming up for them? And have these countries, South Africa and Ghana, done what they can to create a more enabling environment for trade between the two countries?
Peter, there's certainly room for improvement in the context of making it easier to trade between South Africa and Ghana, and same for any African countries wanting to trade with each other. Specifically, South Africa and Ghana, unfortunately, Ghana in the recent past have suffered from dollar liquidity challenges. It's certainly something that we have to keep in mind because it means Ghanaian businesses are struggling to access dollars, which means they're struggling to pay for imports. Unfortunately, we know that trade on the continent requires dollar liquidity. It is that currency of settlement that's used for trade across Africa, which is obviously something that the AFCFTA is also seeing as a barrier to trade on the continent, is trying to fix with initiatives like the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, PAPS. But for now, it certainly is a challenge. We also know that interest rates in the likes of Ghana and so many African countries is very high, which means it's very difficult, and it provides a barrier to access to finance, which impacts ability to grow your capacity, ability to finance working capital. So these things are significant challenges. So we often talk about AFCFTA in the context of tariffs, but we must remember these non-tariff barriers, like I've mentioned now, and of course the other big one, the big elephant in the room in the context of non-tariff barriers, like the Standard Bank Africa Trade Barometer highlighted for us very recently, is infrastructure. Businesses need better infrastructure to trade, roads to get the goods to the ports, rails to get the goods to the ports, and then that port infrastructure, absolutely critical, which we still need a lot of work on.
Talking about infrastructure, we are in the industrial revolution, whether it's 5G, 4G, I'm not sure where we are at this stage. The question is, what about the digital applications between countries? Before, there was a lot of paper movement that slowed everything down. What have you seen between South Africa and Ghana in terms of digital apps that can make business easier?
I'm not aware of specific digital applications specific to that corridor, Peter, but certainly some of the digital work and progress that's been made in this context in the broader Africa space is certainly applicable to Ghana too. We're seeing initiatives, like I said, by AFCFTA directly to use PAPS, a Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, which allows businesses to pay and settle in local currency. It's a great use of technology. We know that trade generally is very, very ripe for disruption using technology like blockchain, because there's a lot of documents still involved in international trade, and we're seeing a lot of institutions in the logistics space, in the financial industry, all trying to leverage this technology for better use. Standard Bank, as an example, specifically is using blockchain technology in its international payment space. The pilot last year, we settled more than 100 billion rand in payments using this new type of technology. So very good progress being made. The other, and perhaps just one last example, Standard Bank being a reference point, we're using technology to match businesses across the continent with each other. It's one of the big challenges that we often see talking to businesses on the continent. They struggle to find a reputable supplier, or they want to access new markets, but where do they find those clients? And I think institutions like ourselves that's got such a broad footprint, we have a role to play, and we're using technology to connect these businesses with each other across the continent.
Philip Myburgh, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and thank you so much for giving us your time and some insights between the trade between South Africa and Ghana in particular, but I think even some scope on what's happening across the continent. Thanks for your time.